Breaking news just into us. President Trump has just commuted the sentence of a woman we mentioned at the top of the program, 63-year-old Alice Johnson. This follows a White House meeting with Kim Kardashian, who pressed for Johnson's release. Jeremy Diamond live at the White House. Jeremy, what do we know about this?
That's right, John. Two White House officials are now telling us that President Trump today commuted the prison sentence of Alice Marie Johnson. She has been serving a life sentence in prison on charges of attempted cocaine possession, conspiracy, and money laundering. This comes a week after the president met last week with Kim Kardashian West, who brought a little bit of celebrity appeal to this case that had been gaining some popularity online with calls for an act of clemency on the president's part. And it appears that her appeal was successful. Kim Kardashian coordinated this effort with Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, who helped coordinate this Oval Office meeting just last week. And of course, John, this comes as the president has been increasingly turning to his power to pardon or to commute the prison sentences of people. He's issued several pardons recently, but this is one of the first that has been really somebody who is currently serving in prison, a commutation, and also somebody who really doesn't fit the profile of a political ally of his. The only closest thing that we can think of is Jack Johnson, the famed boxer, who his case was brought to the president's attention by another celebrity, Sylvester Stallone, but that was a posthumous pardoning on the president's part. This is somebody whose life is actually going to be affected by this. She is going to be, we expect, released from prison as a result of this commutation, though it is unclear at this point when that would take place, how short the commutation will be, and whether it will apply to these 21 years that she has already spent in prison. So we are still awaiting some more details, but obviously interesting following that meeting with Kim Kardashian West last week and the additional reporting we now have that the president is increasingly turning to this power of the pardon. John?
Jeremy Diamond with the breaking news. Appreciate it, Jeremy. If you get the paperwork with more details, let us know. Let's bring it back in the room. Again, we talked at the top of the program. We talked about how this case is different. Alice Marie Johnson, drug charges, not a political figure. Interesting, you talked about the resistance from John Kelly and how it seemed a little tone-deaf politically. Is this, I don't know if compromise is the right word, is this a compromise on the president's part in the sense that it's a commutation, not a pardon? So it's a get-out-of-jail card. It's not a wipe it all away.
It looks that way, but without knowing the details of why this happened or how this happened, I'm loath to speculate. I do, again, want to say, though, that I think that the specifics of this case more match what the pardoning power and the commutation power is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be devoid of process. I do think that that's a legitimate concern on the part of White House officials, and it's understandable. I also think that the thing I hear from White House officials about sort of the pardon issue generally is the message the president is sending. It isn't just sort of this is a targeted message toward Paul Manafort that he could, whatever. My colleagues and I reported that the president's former lawyer, John Dowd, had discussed this with Manafort's lawyer about the possibility of a pardon down the road. So that's not really a surprise, but it does suggest that basically laws don't matter. It's if there's a constant get out of jail free card, I think that is where you start to see an issue. I think there would be less concern about the Alice Johnson case had you not had all of these other pardons prior to that.
Right, or now that you have the Alice Johnson case, and again, some people will say it's the celebrity.
Sure.
It's Kim Kardashian getting a meeting that, average Joe from Omaha, Nebraska can't get. But you have this president using the case here. Somebody else asking for the same thing is Rod Blagojevich.
That's right.
The former Democratic governor of Illinois who's in prison essentially for a pay-for-play scheme. And so he wants the same thing. His wife has gone on television and said, Mr. President, please let my husband, the former governor, out. Now, that one would take you right back into the political conversation.
It would.
Because he was put in jail by Pat Fitzgerald, friend of James Comey. It's pay to play. He was a prominent Democrat. That would be, we'd be having, welcome to the Trump paradox, a very different conversation.
Incredible political corruption and the selling of a Senate seat is what that one is about. And I think that is why that one is so disturbing to people.
I think the use of the pardon power, what we're seeing with Trump in part, to get back at prosecutors like Pat Fitzgerald or James Comey, who he has a bone to pick with, which is certainly would be, if he were to go through with it, a unique use of the pardon power that we've never seen by a president,
And so it gets hard. It gets hard to separate these other cases, even though the pardon of Jack Johnson, okay, Sylvester Stallone called the White House and brought it to his attention. Who cares who made the call? It's the right thing to do. Alice Marie Johnson, Kim Kardashian brings it to his attention. People say it's all reality TV. In some ways, who cares if it's the right thing to do?
But if it's really the president thinking that someone like Alice Johnson was treated unfairly and that's why he's commuting her sentence, the larger issue of sentencing reform is not something that he has shown any willingness to take up. The discussion keeps focusing on prison reform, but sentencing reform, which could have helped someone like Alice Johnson, is not something that seems to be on the table.
Right. The other thing, too, that I would just note is that the type of reforms that you're talking about involve people across the board. You don't get to cherry pick who deserves good treatment and who doesn't. And more often than not, when we have seen the president talk about law enforcement in the context of certain groups and certain individuals, it's real iron fist stuff. And then when it comes to people like Rod Blagojevich, you hear about how unfair this all is. So that's worth weighing, too.